How's it going, everybody? I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. Today, I will be talking about the best shonen anime not named One Piece, because let's be honest, there is no show out there that can compare to One Piece. Just so you're all aware, this list will also include the show's respected mangas if I read them, and of course, I will be mentioning whether I have read them or not. This list will be primarily comprised of shows that are still ongoing, even if their respected mangas has ended. The reason I'm focusing on ongoing anime is because it allows me to focus on the current era of shonen anime and state why I think they are the best. I will try to focus more on the anime up until the point when I switch to the manga and judge them based off of that premise. Also, I'm not going to go in any particular order mainly because these are all different types of series and comparing them to each other wouldn't make much sense, even though they are all categorized as shonen anime. Also, I will be spoiling key moments for the series, so feel free to leave the video if you hear a show that you're not caught up with yet. The first show I will talk about is the most popular anime on this list, My Hero Academia. Assuming that most people have heard of this show, I'm going to quickly breeze through the plot and get to my take on this series. So, the show follows Midoriya Izuku as he tries to become a legendary hero like his idol, All Might. However, Midoriya has no superhero ability or a quirk. Despite that, he continues to work toward his dream by studying various quirks and how they are used. One of his friends gets kidnapped by a villain, and he rushes in to save him despite not having any abilities whatsoever. As he struggled to save his friend, the greatest hero in the world, All Might, saw him rush in and respected his quick decision making in order to save another person. All Might decided to entrust his quirk to Midoriya and train him to inherit his title as the greatest hero. Now, this show is really good and put together really well with the wonderful art style and animation along with the music. However, My Hero Academia does have some serious flaws. Despite having a really good premise with making the protagonist have no ability whatsoever, only to give him the strongest quirk, My Hero struggles to make the protagonist likable. The fact that he gets the strongest quirk in One for All makes his development a little rushed. However, I do like the fact that he's too weak and inexperienced to use the quirk correctly and continuously hurts himself while using it. Watching him strategize and come up with ways to use his quirk in a way that doesn't break every bone in his body was his highest point. After that, I see nothing redeeming about Midoriya. The show does have a really nice supporting cast with Bakugo and Shoto, as well as a really well written antagonist in Shigaraki. Now, with Bakugo, he's the typical shonen rival character, with him being born with an incredible quirk and having both the knowledge and experience to use it to its fullest potential. And of course, he has to be super edgy by yelling die every time he attacks someone, which I personally love. He becomes super jealous of Midoriya when he saw him suddenly get a quirk and slowly begins to surpass him. We see it affect him in a positive and negative way. He begins to doubt himself and whether he's actually improving. It affects his self-confidence, but only to a slight degree, because he has the same goal as Midoriya, and that is to become the greatest hero and surpass All Might. In Shoto's case, he wants to also surpass All Might by only using his mother's quirk. He inherited both of his parents' quirk, but doesn't want to use his dad's because of the abuse he and his family endured at his father's hands. His father, Endeavor, is also an interesting character. He abused his family because he wanted to be the strongest hero, but he was stuck at the second behind All Might. His anger and greed caused him to marry someone based on their quirk in hopes of having a child who had both of their quirks. After a few tries, Shoto was born, and Endeavor forced him into doing extreme and brutal training in order to have him surpass All Might. This led him to abuse his wife and kids whenever they got in his way, and Shoto could not forgive him for it. As he shouldn't, domestic abuse should not be condoned. Unfortunately, Endeavor realized this too late, and he emotionally and physically scarred his family for life. Endeavor is such a well-written character. He's supposed to be maniacal and narcissistic, but when he finally became the number one ranked hero after All Might retired, he realized what he did. Early on in the series, Endeavor justified his abuse by claiming it was to surpass All Might. In his mind, the end justified the means. When he finally reached the place he was trying to get to, he looked back at everything he had done and realized that he was a horrible monster. At that point, the ends no longer justified the means. He wishes to fix his mistake, but he can't, and those mistakes are shown in his eyes every time he confronts his family. This is probably one of the best character developments in anime and manga right now. We get plenty of villains to hero characters in shonen series, but most of them don't have to face their past every day like Endeavor does, and it's great. Most of these types of characters would have killed the people they hurt and have to live with the memory of doing it, while Endeavor sees and hears the people he hurt on a regular basis, and it'll be difficult for him to make it up to them. But he still wants to try, even though he knows they will never forgive him. And the best part about Endeavor is that he's only a side character, not the main antagonist. The main and potentially final villain is Shigaraki, the leader of the League of Villains. Shigaraki was trained by All for One, All Might's arch nemesis. Shigaraki was kind of a pushover in the beginning of My Hero, but he's slowly developing into a top tier villain. His whole ideology revolves around the fact that his childhood was miserable and full of suffering, and the one who saved him from it was All for One, not a hero. So, in Shigaraki's mind, there is no such thing as a true hero, and he wants to prove it by spreading death and chaos. His ideology goes against Midoriya's, and they have clashed several times already with no clear winner. The point the manga is on right now, they are both developing their powers and growing stronger. The series does a great job of telling both sides of the society people live in and what causes them to become heroes and villains, as well as the paths they take afterward. The next series on this list is one I've already discussed in a previous video, so I won't go into too much detail. The show I'm talking about is Haikyu. Now, as being one of the best sports anime, Haikyu also follows the shonen formula. Hinata is the gifted player with an edgy friend or rival, who he grows alongside with. Hinata is a really enjoyable character to follow, with his progression and development continually happening in between and even during games. Let's not forget about Kageyama. His development is done so well, with him being introduced as a narcissistic and toxic player to becoming humble, then to a fully confident leader. Plus, the full supporting cast are all fun to follow. Not a single one is annoying or unlikable. They are all so well written and contribute so much to the team and development of the protagonists, Hinata and Kageyama. The next anime on this list follows a similar premise to one of my previously discussed manga in Mashle, Magic and Muscles. But you know this one came out first and Mashle gets compared to it a lot. The anime I'm talking about is Black Clover. Black Clover follows Asta, a young orphan who since birth has not been able to use magic. While his foster brother Yuno had been gifted with magical talent, Asta and Yuno form a rivalry to see which one of them will become the Wizard King first. The Wizard King is the most powerful wizard in the country and assists the king in political affairs but takes full control of the country during a crisis. When Asta and Yuno turned 16, they got their grimoires, a magical book that stores their spells. Yuno received a 4-clover grimoire, the same grimoire as the first and most powerful Wizard King, while Asta receives a 5-clover grimoire. In the story, no one knows what a 5-clover means. However, the narrator gives us some background info on it. The narrator states the fourth leaf of a clover houses God, while the fifth leaf houses the devil. The story is really well written, with showing how hard work is the best way to progress through life. Even though Asta has no magical talent, he's trained his physical body up to compete with other wizards, and his grimoire stores powerful weapons, and the first one he gets was an anti-magic sword that could cut and deflect magic. While in Yuno's case, even though he was born with an abundance of magical talent, he doesn't slack off. Despite being leagues ahead of him, Yuno sees every single wizard insignificant, and the only wizard he should worry about is Asta. He knows Asta's work effort and drive will propel him past every single other wizard he meets. Asta never gives up. He will always charge forward despite impossible odds, especially if someone is in danger. Yuno admires this about Asta, and it's the reason Yuno views Asta as his only rival. No other wizard in the country can compare to Asta in Yuno's eyes. Other shonens tend to make the rival character extremely talented, but they don't put in the work effort that the protagonist does. But Yuno does, so he grows at the same rate as Asta, which I genuinely love. Despite its amazing story, Black Clover has some serious flaws. The supporting cast are not that likable. Don't get me wrong, there are some awesome and badass characters, but for the average support characters, they are not enjoyable to follow. Also, the dialogue is very low tier compared to other shonen, especially in the anime, which I got a majority of my experience with this show from. For example, one of the supporting characters, Vanessa, was fighting a powerful enemy who had her at the ends of her ropes. She claimed she had to defeat him and go to her friends. Her opponent emphasized that she has no chance, and Vanessa reiterated with confidence that she was going to see her friends, and then pulled a 180 and won the fight. If she was strong enough to beat him, how was he beating her, and why reiterate that she was going to see her friends? I don't know if this is an anime only scene, but it took the tension and seriousness right out of the scene. Also, why does every single side character need to have an opinion on major events? It just devalues their input if everyone has a say on what's going on, and it drags on the series. With the manga, I can skip past the dialogue. It's harder with the anime because I don't know if they are going to speak for 10 seconds or 10 minutes. Another negative aspect of the anime is the animation is really poor. Edgy scenes are dialed back so they don't look as badass as the manga. And the fight scenes are poorly done with horrible animations, making the scenes rather dull. The story is great, the protagonist is written really well and has awesome development, as well as having an equally good antagonist with the Eye of the Midnight Sun. I am not going to discuss what makes them great. I think it would be better for you guys to go and experience that for yourselves. Oh, and before I forget, I also wanted to mention the demon mentioned earlier in the series isn't a metaphor, and the anime makes sure to let you know that with the anime opening, and they become more relevant in the more recent arcs. The story introduces them in a non BS way. They are foreshadowed early on in the manga, but the anime makes sure you don't forget it with their incredible openings. It's not a bad thing, I really like it. If you're debating whether to watch the anime or read the manga, go for the manga. It's 100 times better. The only thing the anime has going for it is the music, and you can look that up whenever you want. Now, this next series is the only one on this list where I have seen both the anime and manga, and I genuinely prefer the anime over the manga, and that is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The story is pretty simple. It's about manly men doing manly things while striking some gay poses and kicking ass wherever they go. The plot is a little lacking with it not really being narrative driven, but instead revolving around the characters. The characters are the entire story with each part having new ones and some coming back from a previous part. This allows the story to constantly progress and adapt itself into something new every arc. The most noticeable change would be to the power system. It went from Hamon or Void, which was a light-based energy the body produced to fight vampires, into stands, which are extensions of the soul that have special abilities to fight other stand users. This show unfortunately has a lot of flaws. Despite being the king of anime memes, the plot is full of holes with the author constantly forgetting his story and completely changing the narrative. But of course, the antagonist comes in to save the series. Each part has multiple antagonists, but the final ones are always the best and make the climax of the arc and final battle incredibly hyped, even though some of them are repeat characters. Let's not forget the music and animation. Both are top tier, and they add to the atmosphere and the epicness of the series. Currently, the manga is no longer a Shonen Jump series, and it had moved on into Jump Square. But the anime is still on the arcs that were published in Shonen Jump. So it's allowed to be on this list, especially since it has the best anime adaptation on this list. The final show I would like to discuss is not necessarily the best one on this list, but it certainly is the most surprising, and that is Food Wars. Food Wars follows Yukihiro Soma as he tries to become a better chef than his father. His father enrolls him at Tutsuki Academy, the best culinary school in the world. His father challenged him to become the best chef at the school, otherwise, he would never be able to compete with him. Soma learns of the 10 best chefs in the school, the Council of 10, who also hold a serious influence over the school itself and can make executive decisions if they have a majority vote. He aspires to claim the number one seat and eventually beat his father in a cook-off. He then learns of the school's Shokugeki system, where political debates are resolved with a cook-off. The show has an amazing story with Soma being the driving force of the narrative. His personality is similar to other shonen protagonists, but the battles are not fought with fists, but with cooking skills. I was about to say knives and forks, but that's a completely different show altogether. The politics of the show are not common for a high school setting. People's careers and livelihoods are on the line because if they are kicked out of the school for any reason, they may never be able to work as a chef again. So each battle may not be to the death, but they hold just as much stakes. And I ain't talking about the meat. Okay, bad puns aside, the show is phenomenal and high paced. Personally, I love cooking shows, and seeing them put into a shonen style format makes them so much better. Also, the show is rather infamous for how they display the tastiness of the food. They make the person eating have a foodgasm, where the person eating the food has a massive orgasm displayed with the food they just ate. The best part of the foodgasm is that it doesn't discriminate between genders. Both men and women have it. So not only do the male readers get some eye candy, but so do the women. Now, I first read the manga before the anime came out, so I am a little biased when it comes to which one I prefer. But the anime is great and well adapted. The only downside I have is that some high tense scenes have this whole moving background thing where there are lines moving at high speed behind the characters, and I personally don't like that. It's a minor thing that bothers me while I was watching, but the animation for the foodgasm were actually pretty cool, so it is a fair trade. If any one of you want to check this series out, just be careful if you're going to watch in public. It is very sexual. You have been warned. Despite the sexual nature of the series, the story is too good to ignore. And there's not a single disappointing character in the entire series. Also, I just learned this while doing research for the script, and apparently the most recent season in the anime was the final season, and it just ended a few months ago. Since I have already made the script for it, I decided to break my rule and leave it on the list since it ended recently. And those have been my take on the best quote unquote ongoing shonen anime series. Now, before I go, I want to give out a couple of honorable mentions and quickly talk about why they didn't make this list. First up is Demon Slayer. Despite having the best animation on this list, as well as the most potential, I've only seen the first season, and I wanted to watch the movie before reading the manga. Also, I heard the manga's ending sucked, so I am in no rush to start it. Since I don't have enough material to give an accurate take on the series, I decided to leave it off of the list. I would also like to give recognition to The Promised Neverland. It was left off of this list for the same reason as Demon Slayer. I've only seen the first season, and I wanted to watch the second one when it came out, so I am holding off on reading the manga. Personally, I thought Promised Neverland had the best first arc out of all the other series on this list. Unfortunately, I don't know if it will keep up this quality of content in the next season, so I can't give my take on it. And that's going to be it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank you all so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. I will see you all in the next one, and remember to keep having fun. See ya!